we'll go from there. Right, and then her camera glitches out right then.
Yeah.
That's exactly, all of a sudden.
We go live. There goes Toiya.
Yeah.
Am I back? Am I here?
You're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
You keep glitching out, but you're a woman of mystery. That's
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Ooh, mysterious. What's up, everybody? My name is Indy, and the gentleman down there sucking on that big old straw. That's a big straw. That is Mr. J. Powell from Powell Group Consulting.
It's got to be sexually conscious. It's like rubber or something. I don't know what it is.
And this is Indie Game Business.
I can't afford titanium straws.
Titanium straws. Straws. That's how they say it in North Carolina. Anyways, yeah, this is Indie Game Business, and we have this is like our most guests ever. So I guess I will let everyone introduce themselves, if that works. So go for it. Who's first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I hopefully am not too glitchy. I am Toiya Kristen Finley of Schnoodle Media.
Hi, I'm Michelle Clough. I'm an associate partner with Tailspinners, which is a game writing co-op.
Oh, hey, I'm Alexandra Lucas, and I'm a freelance game writer and narrative designer.
Hi, I'm Rachel Presser, assigned to media and consulting, and there's too much to list in what I do. You're just going to stay tuned for the talk to find out more. I'm known as that crazy tow lady. You've probably seen me at GDC and other events. Yeah.
So we got together with Troy. Troy was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she mentioned the fact that, you know, with these conference cancellations, she was really excited about her talk that she was going to give, but now she didn't have anywhere to give it. And I was like, I have a solution for that. So I am going to let her take over, and I'm going to enjoy the easiest podcast that I've had to date. But we're talking about how you can market yourself and, you know, speak at conferences and all the kinds of wonderful things that go along with it. So it's kind of a really meta program today. But with that, Troy, you're in charge.
Thank you so much for having us on. One reason why I was really excited about this talk is because this is an important part of networking, and we never look at speaking at conferences in terms of networking and branding yourself. And so I met Alexandra and Michelle and Rachel at conferences, and, you know, we network together, and here we are networking some more. So the first thing I wanted to start out with is, you know, what was your first speaking engagement, and what did you talk about?
I'll go first, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So my first speaker engagement was in 2015 at Indiecade, Indiecade East to be precise. I was on a panel with the CEO of Playcrafting when it was still known as the Games Forum. It was those were totally different days back then. And Sean Allen of New Challenger. We were talking about the ups and downs of running a video game Kickstarter when it was still something of a novel concept. I think nowadays, it's a way different landscape for crowdfunding, way different landscape. And that was actually what Sonic Toad initially started out with, before I branched into, excuse me, before I branched into business consulting for game developers and helping the professional sector do business with game devs, and then branched into media production, other things. I actually focused a lot more on crowdfunding because I now had the experience. I had the the tax and financial know-how that people were having issues with. So it was a different landscape back then. So it was a very easy topic to get accepted at places. So I think that talk though was actually what really booted my career to the stratosphere in ways that other moves just weren't accomplishing.
So, Alex, do you want to go next, or?
Oh, sure, yeah. Probably my first speaking engagement was at PAX Dev 2016. I spoke with a colleague of mine about leveraging liberal arts skills into a career in games, with focusing on how a lot of those skills apply to developing your resume, developing your website, And then just sort of the, communication skills and things. And I had recently concluded my time studying game design at DigiPen. So I had recently been a student. So yeah, and that was just, I have before studying game dev, I got a degree in English with a creative writing focus from another school. And so that was just a topic that I'm very passionate about. I definitely am someone, I do think liberal arts skills have a really solid home in games, and definitely advocate for that. So that was just, that was my first opportunity, I guess. And it was also someone who I had, an instructor at DigiPen who I TA'd for, and so she kind of gave me that opportunity, since we submitted the talk together. So
English majors in the industry unite. Yes.
Yeah.
It is not pointless. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Awesome. I guess I could go next. So before getting into the game industry, I did several other sort of minor public speaking engagements to do. Well, firstly, I was in the JET program, which is the sort of English teaching program in Japan. So of course I had to do a bunch of public speaking for that, and I ended up doing a couple sessions for like kids about like anime and manga and things. But my first game industry speaking engagement was at GDC 2014 about sexualization, or like how to write sexualized and interesting male characters. And the story of how I did that was kind of interesting because I was still very new to the industry. I had like only a few like very minor credits to my name, but I had made friends with, people like Toiya, as well as Tom Abernathy, who was head of the narrative summit committee. And I remember we were at a bar after sessions, we were talking, and I was saying to him, hey, there's all this discussion about like sexualized female characters, and I don't see anybody talking about the fact that, hey, some of us are attracted to men, but there's no focus on like how do you make an attractive male character. There isn't really a model for sexualized male character. Man, I'd love to go to a session about that. And Tom, in his beautiful, amazing wisdom, said, you should pitch a talk about that. And so I did, and then it somehow ended up being like the number one rated talk of the narrative summit that year. So then I was like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing now. This is what I'm talking about. So yeah, I had a great sort of first session and first speaking session in the industry.
So without getting into how old I am, I don't even remember what year it was. It was either 1999 or 2000. And it was when I was still a master's student. I was getting a master's in English and creative writing. Yes, again, English majors unite. I went to an academic conference where I also had a paper published, and I was looking at stereotypes of Black characters, especially in films made by Black filmmakers. So that was my beginning. And then as far as games goes, I have a very similar story as Michelle. I went to my first writers roundtable, which Richard Dansky hosts every year at GDC. And I was very new to the industry, knew nothing about game development. I heard people using all these terms I had never heard of, and I was having to figure out, based on the conversation, what the heck they were talking about. And so I went up to him afterwards and I said, it would be really great if there were a roundtable that was specifically for people who are looking to get into game writing. Maybe they were already in the industry and they wanted to focus on game writing. And he said, the logistics of that probably would not work for GDC in San Francisco, but you should pitch that to GDC Austin. Again, a long time ago, rest in peace, GDC Austin. And I was kind of like, what? I'm nobody. I know nothing. And he's like, yeah, you should pitch that. And I did, and it got accepted. And now it is a long-standing, once-a-year thing at GDC. So there are lots of different ways, different avenues that you can get into speaking. I did also want to look at, for a brief moment, because we probably have people who have been thinking, I would like to speak, but I really don't know what the benefits might be for me besides great embarrassment and anxiety and having to speak in front of people. Why is it worth it? What benefits have you gotten from speaking at conferences and conventions?
Well, I think there's like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please go ahead.
Oh, all right. I think that there's for me personally, this is just based on someone who's been doing this for about 5 years now. Like I'm now a regular at many conferences, and I've done a lot of paid speaker engagements at colleges and other places. And so it's just for me personally, I think that there's like two aspects of it. One of them being, well, like I said, this is just a personal thing. Feel free to take this with a huge barrel of salt. I like it because it makes me feel a lot more confident in myself and my abilities, my knowledge. Shameless plug. Maybe I'll link to this in the chat later. I kind of can't with my hands full right now. But I wrote an essay, basically telling Imposter Syndrome to go fuck itself. You might really enjoy this essay because I know a lot of people, especially a lot of marginalized people, in the creative fields, doubly so in games, feel a sense of imposter syndrome. But when I'm up there and I know that, hey, these conference organizers selected me to talk about this, I keep getting asked back to this event year after year, or better yet, I was invited to go rant about this. That means they trust me, they trust my knowledge, they trust my people and my research skills. Eat a dick, imposter syndrome, that's enough. Okay, so that's the personal side of what I think is a very big benefit of speaking at events. There's a very big personal element to it. But then, as for like the professional and like industry side of things, it's because other people who are, attending that talk you're giving also are, hey, they're benefiting from your knowledge, your experience, your perspectives, your individual skills as a speaker. While they're benefiting, from all that, it's also that you're also like increasing consciousness of some issues. You're introducing like new perspectives to people who may not have thought to like do things a certain way. Like case in point, like there was this whole blow up on Twitter a few weeks ago, which was really shitty because like someone was basically like openly mocking, I think it was either a student or like a very like novice indie dev who used like spreadsheets to make his game. Like, oh god, like why would you do that? I'm like, are you kidding me? I love going to all these events because I go to talks, I listen, I give my talks, people listen, and you learn about, it just opens up, your worldview because you learn about all these different tools, different constraints, different, there's just so much to learn, so much to discover, and I love being able to, like, give back to that. And then, to close, because we got other people to talk, to end on that note, it's also that, so when you're up on that stage, sharing that perspective with people, it's also that you have their undivided attention in a time when getting people's attention can just be more difficult because we have to focus on so many things. Whereas, because that Twitter post or that blog post or even this very thing we're doing right now on Discord can easily be lost, in 20 other tabs you got in. But when people are there at that conference, they're focusing on you, and so that is why it's such a big benefit to keep doing these events, because you got that focus, now you got to make the most of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say actually many of the same things that Rachel did, because like I absolutely feel, as you say, that like rush of confidence of like, oh my god, people actually like are listening to me and think that the things I'm saying are important. This is awesome. I want to do this all the time. And also, as you say, like particularly in my talks, I really connect with the fact of I have a lot of students and a lot of marginalized people come to my talks about sex in games and things, and to see them coming up and being like, wow, so like, sometimes it's not even about teaching someone something new. It's about having them come up to you afterwards and be like, I'd always felt that way, and it felt so validating to have somebody else say that or to put it into words or something like that.
Yes, but I've always loved your talks, by the way.
Oh, thank you. the other thing, of course, is to a certain extent, like, in terms of the networking element, it is also a really good way to get your name out there and sort of circulating, particularly if, like me, you are allergic to social media and you're just like, oh, I have to have a Twitter account, I have to tweet, I have to increase my visibility and brand. Oh, I don't wanna. Whereas, so, I mean, as a result, yeah, I probably don't have as many people know about me, but the people who get to see my talks, like, I'm able to build that, as you say, closer connection with them because, as Rachel says, they're paying attention, they're there to, like, attend the talk, and everybody gets something out of it. The other thing is that it has definitely opened up opportunities to me, like, particularly when I started and I didn't have that, like, big portfolio. Instead of just being like, I'm Michelle, I've done, like, these 2 games, it's, I'm Michelle, I've done these 2 games, and I've done this series of incredibly well-received talks on, this particular topic. And of course, it sort of led to one of the other things I do is I'm actually chair of the IGDA Romance and Sexuality Special Interest Group, which is an organization for devs that are interested in making sex games and romance games and everything in between. So, and that ended up being a really good, connection, because everyone was like, yeah, no, you should totally do that. You've been talking about it. So I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities that can open up when you're giving talks like this. Although I will say, and we may go into it later, that sometimes they're not always the opportunities you expect. But more on that later.
Yes.
Toiya, you want to go ahead?
Oh, well, I was going to
Toiya.
let you go. I'll go last.
Oh, okay. Yeah, +1 to all of that. It really, really helps build your confidence, for sure. And also, speaking about the IGDA SIGs, it's through a poster session I did that I met the person with whom I started working on the IGDA Serious Games Special Interest Group. And it's, particularly if your talk is stored somewhere with some kind of permanent storage, like the GDC vault, it's a great way, you can just direct folks who are interested in working with you or interested in, even like your PowerPoint skills, that kind of thing, your research skills, you can just direct them to the vault and they can check it out, and it's very professional and nice to be able to do that. Also, speaking back to the giving back piece, it's been like really rewarding to be able to go speak at DigiPen and Wellesley College, 2 places where I studied, just to talk about topics that I'm really passionate about, and also there's also the advocacy piece that's there. I mean, one of my talks I gave at GDC, I got get on my soapbox for sex workers, to hundreds of people live, and then also that's in the vault forever. If you're really, really passionate about something and you've researched it, and it comes through when we'll talk a little later about how do I choose the topics and things, but I think it really comes through, and people respect the work and want to work with you. I definitely have gotten contracts and job inquiries and things based on my speaking engagements, especially ones that are stored online. But it's got a ripple effect that it's kind of hard to calculate. But
oh, absolutely, the same thing. That Indicate talk was really what kicked off my career more than anything, because I was already a play crafting instructor before that. That was what led to the Indicate talk. But oh yeah, it absolutely has this ripple effect, and when people see that you're really passionate about a topic and about a cause, that also can really attract people to you. That's definitely been my experience.
Me too.
Well, I've got both personal and practical. I'll start with the practical. And Michelle touched upon being allergic to social media. I don't get on social media because I'd never get off of it. So I've learned
that is a danger.
It is a very big danger. But being in front of an audience, having your name on a list of speakers lets people know that you exist. And several times we've mentioned, if you are marginalized, the industry is so freaking competitive. Just having your face in front of an audience lets people know that you are there. And especially, because I belong to several marginalized groups, I have had people who belong to the same marginalized groups come up and tell me how important it was to see somebody like them speaking and letting them know, hey, I can be in this industry too. So that's really important. And also, we use the word network a lot. It's like this very businessy, very impersonal concept, but it really isn't, because your network can also be your friends. Your network becomes your professional colleagues, and you gain more friends when you speak. And actually, I was saying this when I got cut off 2 weeks ago, but we all have a mutual friend who has been searching for work. And because we've gotten to know her through speaking engagements and being at conferences together, whenever we see something pop up that would be great for her, we always tag her. So having a network of both professional and friends and colleagues is super important, just to help each other out as well. And when you speak and you hear people speak on the certain topics, and that they're experts at it, when those job opportunities do come along, that they would be perfect for them, and you can direct those opportunities their way.
Okay, try something really quick about networking.
Sure.
To give yet another shameless plug, I wrote a piece on Gama Sutra about this a while ago. Because the way I put it in there was, I actually summed it up at the very beginning. I said there's just two tenets. I said, look, forget everything that your college professors or career services department at your parents taught you about networking. There's only two rules. A, don't come off as thirsty, and B, just talk to people. And I think that people, have tended to forget that, because they think of networking as this very, stiff and formal kind of thing, where it's just and these are only people I reach out to if I need a job or if I need a gig. And it's really more of an ongoing process. And that you're making friends, you're making contacts, you got to frame it in, what can you do for each other, not just can this person help me get a job? And I think that mindset, is really something people got to overcome.
Yeah. And and you're right that sort of speaking is a good way in many ways to get over it. I mean, obviously, in one-on-one interactions as well, but when you're speaking, you are reaching that larger crowd, and you never know, that student in the audience might end up being your boss in 2 years' time. That has actually happened to me. I applied for a job, and the editor was just like, "Oh wait, you're that Michelle? You do those talks? Yeah, you're in." And I'm like, fantastic. And it's that would not have happened if in a one-on-one interaction I had been like, oh, she's a student, she's not going to help my career, which I wouldn't be anyway. But it's particularly speaking means you will never fall into that trap. Whereas the sort of as you say, the kind of networking that I think we usually think of, where you've got a canapé and a glass of wine, and you're trying to work through it. It's very easy to fall into that mindset, because you're just I'm only going to be here for 2 hours, and then I want to get out of here and go home and put my feet up. So I have to use my time properly. Whereas in a speaking engagement, you're okay, everybody in this room, this is now my network. I've reached all these people.
Exactly. And like you said, with not dissing students, I think it's just something you need to, not do in terms of decency, regardless
Absolutely.
of any future benefits. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm still mad about the whole thing where that student, was being dissed for using Excel sheets. And that's not just because I'm an ex-accountant who uses spreadsheets in my game dev work a lot. Not just because I took it personally. No, but it doesn't matter what the tool is. You don't diss a student. It's a crappy thing to do as it is, but especially you never know where that student's going to go. I've had students in my audience, who I kept up with on Twitter, or, through email, and then a lot of them have gone on to some pretty cool jobs, or building their own indie studios, and then guess what? I've actually had more students hire me as a consultant than I've had a lot of really established people. Just putting that out there. So you never know. So someone who's just making their first game or has no credits yet, you got to build each other up. Don't focus on just the big kahunas in the room. Because they might help you once or twice, but you really got to build each other up
Yeah.
and approach networking that way.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here because we got a couple questions from the chat. One of the questions is, what's your recommendation for archiving talks and panels if the conference doesn't save recordings, like recording at the show, getting releases and permission to record and all that nitty gritty? And after we talk about that, I'll ask the second question. And that's from Lantana Games on Twitch.
I'll be honest, I haven't experienced that yet, just because, like, you know, most of my talks have been at GDC, and so, you know, they've done all the archiving. On the other hand, their archiving is sort of behind a paywall. If I had to do my own archiving, I would probably try and find a way to host it, maybe on my own site, and just basically do the recording, record my voice over the slides, because my slides are very kind of image intensive and you sort of need them to get the effect. But maybe everybody else has better experience in that than I do.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of times the conference will have you sign sort of a contract, so they're in control of what happens to both the audio and the video. However, I am a part of a local group here where I am, and we sometimes record our events, and we have our own YouTube channel. So if you have the ability to record talks for yourself, I would highly recommend setting up a YouTube channel and archiving everything there. So it becomes kind of a repository and people know where to look. You can direct them very easily.
Yep, and just something I'll chime in and say is, make sure before you apply to a conference, do your research about what they allow. If recording it is really important to you, there are just some that are black events and they won't. They're very strict about it, or you need a release or something. So yeah, just do that research ahead of time if you can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if they don't have like an FAQ or something, or most of the time there will be some kind of terms of service contract you're going to have to sign. I would check that contract first. If you don't see anything, just ask the conference organizer so you can plan in advance of how you would do this. Like, if you're just going to like set your phone up on the podium, or maybe have a friend, with their phone in the audience, or a camera do something. Yeah, just check your terms of check the service contract first before you sign it, and then if you don't see anything, just ask the event organizers.
Yeah. And as a follow-on for that, if they are kind of very specific about like not sharing the specific talk online, check if that extends to things like, for example, their slide templates. Like it may be a case of, okay, we don't want you giving a video of this specific talk with this specific slide deck, but if you go off and like change the template of the slide deck so that it's now like, instead of PAX Dev or GDC, it's Toiya Kristen Finley or Alexandra Lucas, and just give it out that way. Some conferences are okay with that.
Or ask if you can or ask better yet if it's just okay for you to get, like, say, a 2 or 3 minute clip removing all the conference's branding, just so you can have it like for a demo reel if you're trying to get into a speaker bureau or anything. Yeah, just like say, okay, like I understand I can't put the entire talk online, but can I just get like a 2 or 3 minute clip for my portfolio, and just see what they say.
All right, let me ask the next question from Lantana Games. I've given dozens of talks at conventions and schools, but always have to reach out on my own. Are there lists worth getting on?
Like a list of conferences or website that has them categorized?
Yeah, that has like where you can speak at them.
I know that the IG. Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
I'll go ahead, because mine was a lot more vague.
Okay, because I was just going to say, if you are an IGDA member, you will get this very comprehensive newsletter with various games industry related events on it. If you're on Twitter at all, there's also I can't remember the name off the top of my head. If I go on Twitter, I could probably find it. There is an entire Twitter account dedicated solely to games events. Because I know that like it's pretty vague just to say, oh, just go on Twitter, you can find stuff. And oh yeah, I guess I have found about things by being on Twitter way too much for my own good. But here we go. It's at Events for Games. Yeah,
it's good to know that exists because a long time ago there was a website that would keep up with events, and then I've tried to do it myself. It is very, very difficult because what you find out when you start doing research, there are a lot more events than you realize.
Yeah.
So something I would recommend doing.
It's even worse now.
Mhm.
I say worse, but it's a great time if you're a speaker, because we've got a list that I've been populating of just the online events happening between now and August. There are 20 some of them.
Yeah.
So, and that's including my own shameless plug. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I wrote an article earlier this week in response to the games industry biz article that's like, what does a year without event mean for indies? And I'm like, it's actually a wonderful opportunity. And there was a guy on Twitter that I saw this morning, and he was like, I'm a professional speaker. Now what? And I'm like, it's an opportunity. But anyway.
Okay, so Lantana Games says, I mean, more specifically, speaker lists. Like if a conference or school is looking for a speaker to give a talk on a specific topic, the list that they'd look at to find speakers. Is there a list of speakers?
That one's... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Not that I'm aware of. I've always gotten my college speaking gigs by... I assembled a spreadsheet of schools with game design programs. I hit a bunch of them up, and I tried to see if I had any luck that way after I exhausted my network of people who I met at conferences. And 9 times out of 10, the conferences always got me more hits than reaching out and cold calling, although it doesn't hurt to do it, especially if you've got some speaker gigs under your belt already. But with that said, there's no specific list I can think of aside from reaching out and making your own. I apologize if that's not very conclusive, but that's what I did.
Yeah. I might be able to add a couple ideas onto it, because most of my speaking gigs have been through me applying for them. Having said that, the 2 ways I've gotten other speaking gigs, or at least adjacent to that, is one is obviously to have your own website and to mention on your website that you were a speaker, then and have a way to contact you, because every now and again someone will just be Googling something like, I need speakers for blah 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 topic, and they might end up finding your website if it pops up on the hits. The other way to get on quote unquote speakers list is, quite frankly, befriend your fellow speakers, and then you get emails from people like Toiya being like, Michelle, I'm doing an online roundtable. Would you like to be on your online roundtable? I'm like, I would love to be on the online roundtable. So,
yes.
Yeah, so if you're looking for something where there's some master list that conferences consult, sadly no. But what they will do is probably someone who might be either approached or have approached them, and then later on they might be like, okay, I need people for my panel or roundtable. Who do I know that would be good at that? Oh, hey, that person would be good at it. So again, it sort of comes back to your sort of network of friends and colleagues.
Alexandra mentioned a little earlier subject matter and how you come up with topics. I know that can be kind of a daunting task for some people, thinking about what the heck could I possibly talk about? Or there are so many things that I could talk about. How do I choose? So in your experience, how have you come up with your topics and thought, well, this would be something that I could really share my knowledge about?
Okay, little caveat with that. So I recognize this approach may not work for everybody, but this is mostly what's worked for me, is I look at specific topics that I have experience and knowledge in that I see don't really get discussed that much in games. So for instance, so I do a lot of business-related talks, but business itself is such a wide field. I wrote a book about tax law for game devs because as I mentioned, I was a tax accountant before I got into all this. And I found that those talks easily got accepted just because they couldn't find anyone else to discuss them. You may not have that same kind of luck, with the topics that you have in mind. But like I said, these what makes these conferences, so awesome and a way to really like power up, your career is because they're all about those perspectives and topics that people may not have really explored before. So what I'm saying is like, yeah, because you have like the popular things, all right, like people want to know how you market a game, but what about specific types of marketing? Like, why would you choose this method over this one? Why do you think this game sold and this one didn't? How does your professional experience, like line up with the point of the talk you want to give? So if you don't have some, topic that is just barely covered, think about the takeaway. What should attendees be taking away from your talk about a more popular topic? Why would they go to this? Like, approach it as if you were attending the conference. Why would you want to go to the umpteen talk on game marketing? Like, what's the takeaway for you? Like, yeah.
But you were mentioning what are people not talking about? The way I put it is fill the holes. When you go to conventions or conferences or you look at the topics, what are they not talking about? Like the roundtable I do at GDC every year that I mentioned was my first game industry speaking engagement. That was a hole that needed to be filled. Later on, we added a narrative tutorial at GDC, which has become the narrative tutorial at ECGC. That was a hole that needed to be filled. People who were going to the narrative track were like, I wish there were more practical ways to get my hands on, working through everything that I'm hearing about. So we're like, okay, let's do workshops and have people actually writing the things that we're talking about. And then the last hole, more recently, has been nobody was talking about freelancing. So like about 5 years ago, when, a lot of employed jobs were drying up, people started coming to me and say, how do you do that freelancing thing? Just in in private conversations, after the event was over for the day. I was like, nobody's talking about freelancing. So I started doing lectures about that, and now I have a roundtable about that at GDC. So what holes need to be filled, and can you fill them?
Yeah, that's definitely what I tried to do, with business for indies, because a lot of business talks tend to be geared more towards biz dev managers at larger studios rather than, independent developers who have completely different budgets, completely different lifestyles to consider. And that was a big tenet in how Sonic took off.
I think it's also important to think about, like there was mention of lived experience a bit. Everyone is like a specialist in at least one topic that it's something you don't even think about because it's just part of your daily life, or it's been part of your life for a long time. So like a few years ago, I gave a talk with my husband who has a psych background about like how Disney Emoji Blitz helps me cope with anxiety. So that was something like I have narrative design, I have lived experience with anxiety, so I could speak to that. And that topic just like manifested. It was just something he and I had talked about. And then all of a sudden, why don't we just give a talk on it? And also think about, what are you passionate about when it comes to games? What got you interested in games to begin with? So I particularly in the BioWare space, I was really interested in romance, sexuality, and gender. And that led to my first solo GDC talk about the triple goddess paradigm in Mass Effect. So, and that came together in part because of my English major. It was just, I already had this information in the back of my mind. And so when I saw it in a game, I was like, oh, that clicks immediately. So yeah, definitely think about what you have training in that you might take for granted or think everyone else knows, but probably they don't. They may not.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the reasons why we started this show. It's because I realized even 10 years ago that there was knowledge that I assumed everybody had, but they didn't. And you don't know, even if you've only been doing this 2 years, if you have a question, chances are thousands of other people have the very same question. They just haven't asked it yet.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
they haven't
but-
gotten to the point where they need to, like, they haven't reached that point where they need to ask it yet, but they will. And then they'll be like, crap, I really need to know that thing right now. Yeah. Boosting off of what Alexandra was saying, like, for me, it's not only just a case of, like, what is your passion, like what is your passion about the games you're making, but also what are you passionate about speaking about? Because, you know, to a certain extent, you know, you want to get up there and you want to inform, but to a certain extent you also want to entertain. You want to be talking about something that really gets you excited and really gets you, like, you know, motivated and engaged with your audience. At the risk of opening myself up to the obvious joke, the sort of hole in the industry that I filled was thirsty fangirl that keeps beating the industry over the head with, like, why is there not more sex in games, and why isn't there more sexual content for women? Come on. And to a certain extent, you know, like, generating ideas for talks has not been too difficult, because obviously there's, like, so many variations you can go with that, but also just because, like, it's something I'm really excited to talk about. Like, it's something that if I'm hanging out with all of these people for coffee and somebody introduces the subject, I'll be like, right, I have thoughts, we're all going to hear them, let's talk about it right now. So I think bringing that energy to a talk, I think is important, and it helps to come up with those ideas and just think about what are the sorts of things that I would, you know, very happily talk for 30 minutes or an hour about. So yeah, that helps as well.
Michelle, your
absolutely.
passion shines through when you talk. Just putting a plug in for you.
Yes, that passion is what really, you know, makes people to listen to you. It's what makes you an engaging speaker, and it's infectious. People will catch on that. It's like, because I see it, like, you know, in some of the gigs that, you know, I've had where people got really excited, you know, actually, like, yeah, like talking about, you know, even some of these, like, business topics I've gotten into, when I, you know, want to make them, like, you know, less of, like, a boring thing with, like, okay, here's some statistics from the SBA, here's some statistics from Steam, but, like, what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to present it and get the audience interested? And then I think that audience participation is also key to this, because, yeah, you want to ask, like, so let's say, yeah, you're giving a talk about sex in games. You're like, hey, like, how many of you have, like, played a video game and you thought there wasn't enough sex in it? Like, that's a question that gets people, you know, fired up. Like, maybe I can't quite do that, where I'm like, oh, who wants to get sexy and talk about, you know, their tax returns and R&D credits? Like, but I still find a way to snark about it and make them laugh, and then explain it in a way that they find, you know, easy to comprehend, because I've gotten their attention. And then also that can really help you get a feel for the room, because sometimes you get, you know, a room full of people who have, like, no familiarity with the topic whatsoever. No, because, like, whenever I give you my talks about business, no, I've had all kinds of audiences, like, where I actually will ask the room by a show of hands, how many of you have actually started a business entity before? Because that also can help me tailor the talk as we go. Because if over half the room has some experience with this, there's probably some things that would be safer to skip over, for instance. But yeah, but having, like, a feel for the audience and having passion be infectious, yeah, that's what makes it, yeah, like, speaker gigs just, like, so much more effective than some other ways of putting your name out there.
So have you found that having that niche has been really helpful? We've talked about the person to go to for sex and games, the person to go to for business and marketing.
So this was the thing I was sort of alluding to earlier about, like, that may not be the opportunities that you expect, because it's been a running joke with me that I go to these conferences, I go to GDC, and I talk endlessly about sex and games and how to write sensually and how to write erotically and all this stuff, and then at the end there's always my next client is always, wow, we really liked your talk, would you come and do this science fiction game that has absolutely no romance or sex in it whatsoever? And I've always been like, I mean, yeah, like work is work. I like work, but I guess my brain, like, did you not check what my topic was about? And in contrast, I'll be like going up to like, you know, the romance and sex game people and being like, oh my god, I love your work. You know, hello BioWare, I really love your work. Here's my resume, please hire me. And like nothing, like tumbleweeds. So occasionally, like I love my niche. I embrace it. At one point, I had people being like, well, do you want to be known as like, you might want to like try other topics because you don't want to be known as the sex and games lady. And now I'm like, no. I'm very happy to be the sex and games lady. But it is sort of weird that like I never come away with from GDC with the sex and games lady jobs. It's very strange. So like my actual portfolio is just.
Oh no!
Oh no!
We lost
Oh no!
Oh, there he's back.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
We were hanging on every word, and it's like, no, she was about to tell us.
We were looking for that hole to fill. That's what we were doing.
So sorry. What was the last thing before my Discord? I said before my Discord crashed.
You love being the sex and games.
You said, and the secret to life is, and then that was it.
Okay, so I was just I what I said after that is it's just funny because I never come away with the sex and games lady jobs after GDC. It's my portfolio is just riddled with, you know, completely non-romance, non-sex related jobs that I still get through my speaking gigs because like they know of me, they find my website, they approach me, but it's just so that's why I'm kind of like having a niche is great. I embrace it, but don't always be surprised if occasionally the work you get has absolutely nothing to do with your niche.
Oh yeah, I never imagined in a million years that someone who basically lives in like a storage unit in the Bronx with a desk, would have a home design column. I have, because I am also a writer in addition to being a game dev, and I stumbled upon this freaking interior design and real estate column, and I kind of wound up running away with it. So you never know. You just gotta be open-minded. You just never know, like what kind of opportunities you're gonna wind up with.
Please tell me you're going to do a talk sometime about interior design in video games.
Actually, I have yet another shameless plug. I actually did an article recently, right after the pandemic was declared. I actually did a piece for my column. The place is called Home Stratosphere. Go check it out. I actually did a piece about how video games can help us fulfill incredibly banal fantasies. And one of them being the way that you can, decorate your own house. Because we've had that running gag forever about how Stardew Valley is basically just one giant, like, fantasy, broke-ass millennials. Like, oh, you can actually own a house. You can get married. You can decorate it. This is all stuff that we can't do in real life now. And, that gag's been running forever. We're actually, delved into some of the more, semantics, I guess, of, the role of the home in games. Yeah, so I should actually just start making a list of all the stuff I shamelessly plug, because that is the point of being here. You gotta shamelessly plug yourself. You gotta be shameless about it, because, come on, there's no time for modesty, especially if you're a woman, if you're in a marginalized group. Freaking be proud of your work. I am proud as fuck that I have an audience, and no one's gonna dare tell me any different. So
you just got to take it to the next level, Rachel. When you get tired of plugging everything, you have to start your own stream and podcast, because that's
for sure
ultimate. Yep. Don't worry about plugging your own work here. This entire podcast is about that. So yeah, you're good.
I'd say keep an open mind about where your niche can take you to. It can be so unexpected, unpredictable. I guess I would say my niche is gender identity, LGBTQ plus concerns, and mental health awareness, I guess. Making sure characters are being sensitive to those groups, because I'm part of them. And I never in 1,000 years would have expected that niche would take me to working on Microsoft's Cortana for 2 years. My focus for that was I was on the team that figured out how to respond to questions that Cortana gets that kind of fall under the sexual harassment umbrella. But like, who knew? That's a job? What? So, but yeah, that was really fascinating. And I was like uniquely qualified, in part because of the research I've done, chapters I've written, and talks I've given on a lot of those.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think it would be really helpful to go over best practices for pitching to conferences and conventions, because this is another thing that you rarely see people discussing or talking about. And I know veterans in the industry who still are like, I don't know how to write a good pitch for this.
Real quick, Toiya, unless y'all have things to do, we can go over. It's okay.
Okay, awesome.
I'm loving this right now. So as long as Indy can go and y'all can go, we can go.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm good. This is interesting stuff.
My biggest piece of advice, if you want to get talks accepted, and this is coming from both my experience, applying to, to schools, to game dev things, and whatnot. And this also comes from one of my clients who is a professional motivational speaker. This guy, travels like the freaking country and world, getting to give talks at like corporate sales events, and professional association things. And so I learned a lot from working with him as so like I said, be open-minded to the stuff that you wind up with, because it can actually really help your career in numerous other ways. So I actually learned a lot from with a professional motivational speaker. Like, he really helped me get my speaker career to the next level. And the thing that he and I are both going to suggest here is, like I said earlier, focus on the takeaway. That's the thing that conference organizers really love to see, whether they're a conference organizer or if you're working with like a corporate event or like a school, the event planner. The event planner wants to see two things. The first being, the takeaway for the attendees. So before you even dive into your credentials, your speaker experience, mainly, why are you giving this talk? Why would somebody who's coming to this event want to go to it? That's the first thing to focus on. And then the second thing, which this will come off less in your pitch and more just in how you interact with the organizer or event planner, you want to demonstrate that you are a sweetheart to work with, because the thing that's going to get you asked back to the same conferences, to the same schools for paying work, what's going to get that up is that, you got to demonstrate that you're easy to work with, that you make the event planner's life easy. Those are just the two biggest things I've had as my experience and having a professional speaker as a client.
So I plus one all of that. I will also add on, and this is going to sound like possibly terrible, but I don't think it is actually terrible. And that is, don't discount the power of making connections and mentorship connections with the organizers or the sort of either experienced speakers or the actual committee members or speaker hosts, because they can give you guidance. Like, I would not have the speaking experience that I do if it hadn't been that the fact that I had first made friends with Tom Abernathy, just independent of any wanting to speak. We'd known each other for years, and then we started talking about it. I was able to talk about what I had all these thoughts on the topic again, rambling for ages. And so as a result, he was able, he first said, you should pitch this, and he was able to guide me through the pitching process, and also to to give advice of how best to tailor my pitch. And he absolutely said, as Rachel says about the takeaway, but my magic word for that, toolbox. If you could say the person will leave with a toolbox of blah blah blah, then it sort of gives across the idea that they're actually going to have tools at the end of this that they can use in their work. But yeah, so that is another source of if you're worried about the pitching process. I don't mean, again, to I'm going to become best friends with the speaker organizers just so I can pick their brains about this, but don't discount those genuine connections that you may forge with those people who are organizing conferences, because they can help you. They might not have the time to like completely walk you through it, but they will be able to help you tailor your pitch the best that you possibly can.
Let's. Yeah, some people will know just tricks and tips that are specific to certain conferences. Like I had a colleague tell me to, when I was applying to GDC, check the lecture box for 60 minutes, I want to say, because they can always cut it down to 20. Just like something like, oh, she just knew from going through the process before. And also really dive into details and specifics. It's not the time to be coy or like, I will reveal XYZ. They want to know it all. Just transparency from the beginning. And also, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes if you can. Just think about like, oh, I have to read, 200 of these. What's going to grab my attention? What's going to be unique and what fits for this conference? Some conferences are very themed around a specific thing, or sections of conference are themed around a specific thing. So just like do your research and figure out what's a good fit. And also some conferences again have archives, so you can look and see what has been talked about before. So as we were talking about, fill the hole. But fill those gaps, of topics that haven't been addressed.
So I'm going to apologize in advance, but I'm going to take everybody back to intro level writing classes. I am a former TA. I am a writer and an editor, and really my background in those experiences helped me with writing pitches. And that's, think about, in the West, we have the 5-point essay. You have an introduction with a thesis. That is your argument. Then you have the body where you support the thesis, and then you have a conclusion. And if you can do that, like Alexandra was saying, get their attention right away. You're not rambling if you say, this is what my argument is, this is what I'm going to be talking about, this is why this particular topic is important. Rachel has been mentioning the takeaway. This is going to be the takeaway from this particular topic, and this is what people are going to learn. The other thing is, there are different ways that conferences have for you to pitch. So like GDC has an extremely extensive process. You have to write like basically an essay with 500 characters, and then they ask you for your background in speaking, and they ask you for your credits. And then a conference like ECGC is just like, oh, tell us about the talk in like 200 characters. And that's it. But PAX Dev and the PAXs are very similar to ECGC. And what I find is that little just tell us briefly about your talk is more, that's the blurb that they're going to use for their website and their conference materials. So you want it to be succinct so that attendees understand what the talk is going to be about, but that may not be enough space for you to truly explain what you're going to cover. So if you have the space in other ways to talk about what the topic's going to be about, use it. For example, with PAX, you have that space for the blurb, and then later on, it's like, anything else you want to tell us? Take the time to tell them. Mm-hmm. Also, if there's a place for you to attach documentation or slides, do that too. All of us have spoken on, similar topics. You can recycle topics. I learned that as an MA. Also, again, we're talking about English majors. And one thing I learned from one of my professors is you can always recycle your own material. You can reinvent a talk or reinvent a paper. And so what I do is, if I have spoken on something similar, I attach it. When I submitted something to PAX Dev a couple of years ago, I had a chapter coming out in a book. I attached the copy of the chapter. I've attached slides to show, hey, I've spoken about this before. So, it's always up to the reviewers to read it or not, beyond like that blurb. But I think you put your best foot forward the more information and detail that you can give beyond just that initial character box.
Mm-hmm. Also, bullet point outlines. Good stuff.
Yes.
Yes, we've been joking about being English majors, but if it's one thing that I have learned about working with people in the industry, including people who are storytellers, not everybody likes to read. Okay, so make it easy for them to get the information that they want. If they, like I was saying, if they want more information, they can get it. But don't force them to find it. Like Michelle was saying, nice bullet points. They draw the eye. Keep the bullet points succinct. If you have a bullet point, don't have paragraphs for bullet points. One line is enough.
Oh, and speaking to documentation, I was going to say, Toiya, you do a great job of this on your website. But yeah, having the list of your past speaking engagements ready to go, and also a bio, like a current bio ready to go. I just have a Word doc that has that stuff in it, plus like a bio that is like 150 words. Maybe, and then one that's like 50 words, like because different forms have different character limits. But just that was something when I was first starting. It felt like overwhelming. Oh my gosh, I have to write a bio. But yeah, once you've got it.
It's funny you mentioned my speaker history. The reason why I did that is because I got tired every year of having to find my credits and find my speaker history and put all of that stuff into the GDC box. So I just said, you know what? I'm just going to make a page on my website. Mm-hmm. So every year I'm just going to have to, copy that link, and it's done.
But as on the business side of anything, we constantly teach developers and preach about having a press kit. You have to. I'm with you. I have like Google Docs of all of that stuff. You have to have almost the same sort of press kit about yourself and the things that you're going to be talking about at this conference. I had to look, see if my mic was on. But you have to do the very same thing. And so that's wonderful advice, Toiya.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one other thing, if we're still cool on time. Okay. I think it's important to talk about different events. Professional conference is going to be run differently than a fan convention, which is going to be different than an academic conference. So knowing your audience, again, is very important. How do you choose your topics for, say, the professional event versus the fan run event?
Before we answer that question, I actually, this just reminded me of something I should have mentioned in the previous question, which is there are also those kind of indie, like very old indie events where they have almost like sign up for a 5-minute talk when you just show up, like Lost Levels at, for those that don't know, Lost Levels is kind of an indie event that's happening at the same time as GDC in like the park, and people just show up and sign up and like give 5-minute talks. So that's also a possibility as well. Sorry, I just suddenly was like, oh yeah, there's those as well. Those are also a resource. So sorry, please go ahead.
The fan versus professional. If anybody wanted to jump in on choosing topics for those.
If you're giving talks at like fan type events, you just have to remember is that not all people who play games know how to make them. Mm-hmm. You just need to try to avoid using some of like the jargon that we tend to use in the industry, because not every enthusiast is going to really know the ins and outs of these things. I mean, it doesn't hurt to teach what some of these terms mean. But at the same token, you don't want to. You basically just gotta treat it like, okay, I'm going to assume that while they know about the finished product, they don't know about what goes on behind it. Mm-hmm. That's just been my experience at some of these fan type events. That you can't assume that they know exactly what you're talking about the way that you would, say, with a professional conference.
Yeah. I would also say that I've spoken at fan type conferences. I've given several roundtables at PAX West, and I would say one of the keys is that the fan type conferences, there's usually less focus on a takeaway, like or at least a practical takeaway. So as an example, for a fan type conference, I might just pitch something about like, let's just talk about sex in games and some of these games that already have like sex scenes in them and how do they do them and do they do them well and blah blah blah. Whereas like when I'm doing that for GDC or an industry conference, I might be able to do a similar talk, but I have to think of it in terms of, and how will this give practical advice and practical information to the game developers afterwards? So that to me is kind of the big difference, that like a fan type conference could be to a certain extent just a fireside chat about talking about this really cool topic, whereas industry conferences, at least, you sort of have to feel like, okay, but you have like, what will the developers and the people who attend be taking away that they can then use in their own, that they can then apply in their own game development.
Yep. I mean, I feel like y'all summed it up really well. I'd say I can speak to fan, professional, and academic, I guess. And I don't know, the quick, I feel like fan ones, the core focus is entertainment. And then the professional one, like you were saying, practical takeaways, how can I apply this to my game dev like tomorrow? And then academic, it feels like you can go into analysis just for the sake of it, and also adding to like the further pop culture conversation or whatever your topic is. But yeah, I think it's about the depth and about what the focus. Like, is it for entertainment? Is it for practical application?
And I think also, like the academic conferences, adding a little bit more research. Not that you have to go into a whole lot more depth, but like if you can add additional research that people can do, especially even if it's at the bottom of a slide, is very helpful, because some of the people who are going to be in attendance have done lots and lots of research and studies into stuff. So backing up what you're saying is really important. I gave my first keynote back in November, which was at an academic conference. And I was, again, filling a hole that I had not seen anybody talking about. And so I wanted to back up what I was saying with research, saying this is important. This is how I know this works on a psychological level. And to, like Alexandra, you were mentioning entertainment. Sometimes, at these fan conventions, just let everybody nerd out and have fun.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back to you being sex and games lady, you do a really good job of this, like the professional side. How do I apply this to my work? And okay, well, let's just talk about really great sex scenes from the fan perspective.
Yes,
which is
or
a lot
bad ones. Those are always
bad
fun.
ones.
Yeah.
Bad ones. And so you apply your knowledge as to how you know it's a good or bad scene, but you're not bringing the technical stuff into it.
Mm-hmm.
The fun thing is that, even at fan conventions, you're still going to have people who show up who are in the industry. But it's just like, you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. You can just be a nerd.
Yeah, it can be fun, like particularly once you get like used to, when you get some experience doing these sorts of talks, it can be fun to kind of mix the two a bit. So like, for example, the one talk I do, the Toiya has been on the roundtable at PAX West, which is about basically everybody picks a sex scene in a game and like kind of breaks down what they, like more specifics about what they think about the scene. And it is very much meant to sort of be like this like funny, nerdy, like, let's all, have a good time. But the deep dives can also get, into some actual like, interesting analysis of like what works in a sex scene and what doesn't. And then on the flip side, as all of these people can vouch, when I do one of my like GDC talks, serious industry professional talk, and I approach it where if I don't have a comedic animated GIF on every single slide, I've done something wrong, damn it. So once you get like, it takes a while to like find your kind of, find the balance for whichever conference you're going to. But you can absolutely, make professional talks fun and make, fan talks informative and practical. But having said all that, it is important to remember what kind of conference it is and what sort of tone overall you're aiming to get across.
So for anyone who has never spoken before, how do they know they're ready? Beyond like somebody who is a conference organizer saying, pitch that. Because that's a really easy one.
Damn it! That was going to be my answer. Well, although I will take it in a way and say, I think when your peers or possibly your more like veteran peers are responding, like when you're having talks with them about whatever your topic is, and they are responding well to it and being like, wow, this is really interesting, and that's a cool point, I'd never thought of that. That's probably a sign that you have interesting things to say and that you should be sharing. I've stunned everyone into silence.
I was just going to add,
that's a good indicator. I guess I was thinking a bit more on like the personal. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Rachel. Oh, did we lose Rachel?
Oh no, Rachel.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
I hear you.
I don't know. Am I coming in at all? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I do not know what was going on with that. My connection cracked out before, but can you hear me okay?
Yep.
mm-hmm.
Now we can't hear you.
What was the point you were going to make? Because we did lose it.
Like when you're ready to give a talk. Because, I've talked about my... damn it. I was trying to say, I was thinking from, like, the personal level, because I've had people tell me, like, oh, I'm terrified of public speaking. I don't know if I can really do it. And I think that, like, for some people, like, who just, like, don't know if they're ready, to take that step.
Oh, I think we lost you again.
Oh. We're on
Topic that they're knowledgeable and passionate about. No!
We can hear you now. Oh no.
I was just talking in the mic in the same direction. I don't know what is going on with this thing.
Yeah, you sort of break in and out. Like we get you, and then you just go silent.
Okay, I don't know what is going on. I'm just gonna go type in the chat window because this is just staying.
Yeah, we can read it out.
I was going to add like a really important type of speaking is the post mortem. And if you have worked on a game and finished a game, you can talk about that game. And there are things that you will have learned that you think will help other developers. So that's always something that you can consider as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel may fill this in. I think she was starting to talk about it. But if shyness is something, a barrier for people, Toiya might remember from many moons ago, I was painfully shy. And the thought of getting up in front of people, it was just overwhelming. But if you know a topic really well or you're passionate about a topic, even if you're shy or introverted, it will just spill out of you. It definitely feels comfortable because you've researched it, you know it. And another piece that's nice is after your talk is over, you automatically have something to talk to people about, or at a conference in general. So it can alleviate those feelings if that is something that's a barrier for you.
A lot of conferences have breakout rooms where people can continue the discussion after you're talking, and that's a great way to boost your confidence because you will get feedback. People are, I love if they hang around. They love the talk, but you engage them. They want to talk more about it. That really helps your confidence.
You could guess how successful your talk was based on how many subsequent talks the people who have followed you outside miss while they're talking to you about what you just talked about. Just we've missed the entire rest of GDC. Guess it was a really good talk. I was going to say as well, sort of tying into the shyness and the stage fright. To a certain extent, be willing to use that. Like, I remember at some point someone asked me, like, how do you manage to keep, like, you speak so quickly and you're so energized during your talk. How do you manage that? And I'm like, pure shrieking terror. That is how I manage it. Just like,
I have only done one talk ever. I was asked to do a talk at Indie Game Con in, I guess it's Eugene. And I was like, oh, sure, I'm a streamer. I've streamed in front of thousands of people. No big deal. So, man, I get there, and 2 minutes before the thing, I just start sweating. Just massive sweat coming off my face, dripping off my beard. And then I got really freaked out. The talk went okay, but I was just shaking, and I was completely not prepared for that. I thought, oh, this will be just like streaming, and it totally was not just like streaming at all. In any way, shape, or form, but it was fun. Yeah.
So Rachel has posted her talk or text. Does someone want to read it out? Because I don't know if they could actually see it on the stream.
Oh, I've got it. So I was thinking of the "Are you ready?" question as a personal one. If you're scared at the prospect of public speaking, focus on a topic you're passionate about and start with a smaller event. Example: Lost Levels, ECGC. Instead of a huge one like PAX or GDC, and try rehearsing yourself and with a friend or a spouse, etc., before going public. I'm an extrovert though, so public speaking became a strength after I was told all my life I couldn't do it. Smiley, blushing face.
Yeah, there are certainly like lower stake events, or if something isn't being filmed, for instance, or you can talk to your network again, find out like where audience is more friendly and forgiving, maybe.
Roundtables. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say high schools. There are some game dev classes, but even if there aren't, kids like video games. Yeah. You will have an interested and energetic audience. You can get comfortable speaking in front of them. And Michelle, you're going to say roundtables.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I find in many ways roundtables and panels are like a great way to kind of almost dip your toe into public speaking, because they involve a very different approach than like a full 20-minute to 60-minute lecture where you've got to have speaking notes, you've got to have a slide deck, and everything's terribly terrifying. Whereas like the sorts of roundtables and panels that we take part of, they're basically talks between friends and colleagues, and it's a lot easier to like this is great. This isn't terrifying at all compared to, I still get terrified when I get up on a stage and have to like actually speak solo for however many minutes. So yeah, panels and roundtables.
Yeah, roundtables have a much more. Is my mic back on? Can you hear me? Okay?
Yes.
Yay! Yeah, I'm back. So, yeah, roundtables definitely have like a much more intimate element to them, than like giving a talk in front of a huge audience, because like you're combining both like the public speaking aspect with the audience participation aspect, like all at once. You're just literally sitting at a round table, everyone's just discussing things. It's definitely a different dynamic. I think, I guess a very good way to like dip your toe into public speaking. So like if you're too nervous at the prospect, of like getting up in front of an audience, it is a really good way to like get your feet wet with it.
Let's talk about different types of speaking engagements for a second. There are roundtables, panels, workshops, lectures, micro talks. Which do you prefer and why?
That's a good question, because I like doing all kinds of different things. They all have different challenges that they pose. I don't know if I had to narrow it down just to two. Honestly, I guess it would actually be panels and workshops I like doing the most, because I really just I like to explain how things work. I like that people came and they really got a good takeaway from what I'm discussing. And then I like panels because I'm doing like kind of the same thing, except that I'm also getting other perspectives. We're like kind of like bantering and collaborating in front of an audience, and like there's just something really cool about that I just don't get when I'm doing a speaker gig by myself.
Yeah, for me, I think it's like it's almost a two-part question of like there's stuff that I like in terms of my personal comfort level, and then there's stuff that I like in terms of the final result and outcome. If I was talking about like the one that in some ways is the easiest and kind of most like, oh, this will be great, it would probably be panels like the one we're doing right now, where it's, you know, where it's more not so much like everybody in the room participating, but like a smaller group that's like, you know, has set questions going back and forth, because to be blunt, it's a lot less prep work, and there is this kind of like easy like room for discussion and conversation. Whereas like when I do a lecture, frankly, I spend like 5 months immolating myself every weekend trying to like get every slide absolutely perfect. I don't recommend that, by the way. On the other hand, I would be lying if I didn't say that like the sort of outcome of a lecture just feels amazing. Like after it's done, it's just the greatest feeling in the world, and like and having those people that like, you know, that have resonated and have like come away with something is like really, really powerful. Also, I guess in terms of what is the best balance of the two, micro talks are actually like underrated in that respect, because you can sort of, you know, you can have that sort of like cool slides and cool topic, but because you only have 5 minutes, you only have so much you could do, and there's a lot of polishing, but you're not like, you know, you're not doing like a 200 slide deck like I may have in the past. So
Yeah. Micro talks are definitely my favorite. Exactly the reasons you're saying. It's kind of a mix, the best parts of panel kind of, and the best parts of lecture. So it's like, you know, they're 5 minutes long, maybe, depends on the situation. You know, that's way less prep than a 60-minute lecture. And then you also get to learn, you know, from your fellow micro talk speakers. Like in the situations I've been in, there are, you know, 4 or 5 other people talking for 5 minutes about the umbrella topic, and I always learn something, and then I get to talk with them, network with them. It's just really awesome.
I will also say one nice thing about micro talks is you don't feel the same pressure that you have to absolutely comprehensively cover a topic. Like, because when I do, like, for example, writing sex in games as like a 20 to 60 minute talk, I'm like, okay, I have to say literally everything there is to say about the topic. Whereas when it's 5 minutes, it's like, okay, I'm not like, you know, I'm not going to get it over everything. I'm either going to have a very broad overview, or I'll pick one specific little topic and dive deep on it. But it sort of frees you up from that expectation of, okay, I've got this giant lecture, I have to say everything.
You can get lots of great information from any of them, but I absolutely love workshops. And the reason why is because you can learn practical things, but everybody has different learning styles. And I think it's really important that people get their hands on what they're learning. There's something about putting your hands on it and doing what you just heard about to help it kind of click in your own brain. And like a lot of times you can hear something and you're like, okay, I'm not sure exactly how I can apply this to my own work. With a workshop, you're there doing it. And, you know, as somebody who gives like maybe a 20-minute lecture, and then the rest of the 2 hours or so is for workshopping and doing exercises, if people have questions, if they need something clarified, it can be done in that workshop. Whereas if it's a panel or a micro talk or talk, they may not be able to do that. So I like everything else. I like seeing people being able to work with the things that I've just been teaching.
Toiya does amazing workshops, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yes.
I love your workshops at PAX Dev, Toiya.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, I have a question. So, how does running a workshop end up differing from doing a lecture? And then the second part of that is, if you were to run a workshop online in the world that we live in now, how would you do that?
Oh,
Well, it makes
okay.
what differentiates a workshop from a lecture is that there's much more audience participation with a workshop. You have to get a lot more hands-on, whereas like with a lecture, people are there more to like, they're there to like listen to you talk, basically. I think about, like going to like a lecture at school, for instance. Whereas like with a workshop, like you're specifically there to like do more hands-on things, like exercises or like getting into groups of people. So, like I've been to like many workshops, where we're like, okay, we're gonna go form an impromptu dev team. Let's go pick our different roles here. Let's say, like, how are we going to craft a narrative with like these random things that we're gonna like pick off of a dartboard, like stuff like that, or let's go form like a fake business entity. Like that's the kind of stuff I've done, like in the workshops I've taught. It's much more hands-on, basically.
Yeah, you're really inviting people to work on the takeaways that you've been discussing. Like I was mentioning, I might have a 20-minute lecture. Well, at the end of that lecture, I'll have a slide that mentions all the stuff we talked about, and then I will also have the exercises on that slide that's extracting the points that I've put throughout the lecture. And now we're going to work on those points so you can see specifically illustrating what I was talking about. The online part of it. So there's an easy way where you could do like the speaking part and have like your PowerPoint deck and people could hear that. Doing the exercises might be a little tricky. I would use a platform like FreedCamp where you actually have discussion fora, not threads, because I think threads would be very difficult to manage. With discussion fora, you could, like Rachel was saying, if you had groups, you could have a discussion forum for each group, and then they could discuss the exercise. If they needed to share files, they could attach the files to their posts. You could have FreedCamp open at the same time that you have Discord open or whatever platform you wanted to use for audio and video. That's off the top of my head how I would do an online workshop. I know that other people have done online workshops in the past, so it might take a little bit of research into that to make sure that the platforms would work and the technology would be comfortable for everybody to use. I have also taught online classes, and it worked sort of in the same way, except we didn't have the video and the audio element. There were like modules, where people read the material, and then they had a discussion forum, and I had students in groups where they could talk about the topic throughout the week. And then they had an exercise that they finished at the end of the week. So it would also depend on how long would this workshop be running. Is this going to be a weekly seminar type of thing? Is it going to be a day? Is it going to be 3 days? To kind of figure out the time that people would be spending on the exercises themselves.
So, that question didn't come out of nowhere. We just posted the ticket page and everything for the next IGB event, which is going to be in August, and we're going to have speakers. So, not to put y'all on the spot or anything, but if you want to test this out, then we can do workshops, and there you go.
I don't think anybody's going to be going anywhere, so.
No.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, me too.
Score. All right, get the press release out.
I think I know what Michelle's workshop will be on. I just have a thought.
I'll think about it. Yeah.
Filling the Hole 101. It's
literally and figuratively.
Yeah. The minute this came up as a metaphor, I'm like, oh, I know where it's going, and I love it. But that like, it's interesting because I don't think I've had the chance to actually give any workshops yet. So it'll be interesting to not only experiment in how to do online workshops, but just sort of how to do workshops in general. But if nothing else, I might not immolate myself for 5 months doing slide decks at least.
All right, we are hitting the point here where we need to wrap it soon. I see Indy nodding. Indy's probably nodding for the same reason I'm nodding.
Yeah, I'm starting to get the hot.
What's that? It's time for Jack Daniels.
Drinking a lot of coffee.
Oh, okay.
I still have to have breakfast. It's like we started.
I was thinking it was time for Jack Daniels, but that's fine.
Well, so if anyone out there has any questions for our wonderful panel today, toss them into chat quickly, and we'll get them answered. And if you miss it, They're all on our Discord now. That's how I trick people into joining the Discord. So you can go to discord.gg/indiegamebusiness and you can find everybody there as well. So any last thoughts from you all?
No, I just shamelessly plug some of my work in the chat. Go check it out.
I will just say that I am Chibi Bez in the Discord and not Toiya Kristen Finley, so if that's confusing. And just to kind of circle back to what we said at the very beginning, speaking affords a lot of different opportunities, whether they are personal or professional. You can get book deals out of them, as some of us have. Mm-hmm. You can have a great support network, and just if you have been thinking about it at all and you've been afraid of getting in front of a live studio audience, guess what? Now you don't have to get in front of a live studio audience. There are going to be a lot of streaming conferences, and that's an easy way to just put up your slide deck. They don't even have to see your face. All they do is have to hear your voice. And guess what? Now you have something to put on your resume.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like adding on to that is also like another reason this is a great time to get that sort of speaking experience is I will say about speaking as a sort of a downer, it can be a very expensive prospect because there are quite often the conferences will not, pay your way or will only give you a small stipend. So like I've probably, it's a question of whether I've made more money or spent more money doing talking. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it can be a somewhat, there can be gatekeeping in that respect of just like who can afford to go to GDC versus who can't. But now we're all at home. Now we're all online. This seems like a good equalizer in that capacity. So I really hope that everybody sort of, takes advantage of it.
Although you can get a lot of pretty handsome tax write-offs for all those conference expenses.
Very true.
And a lot of cool bags that you can use for grocery shopping, too.
oh, yeah, especially they put a plastic bag pan in. Yeah. So just,
the thing that I would toss out there, and I know this sounds a lot easier than it is in reality, but the bottom line is if you've got something that you want to talk about, submit it. The worst they can say is no. And you don't even, it's not like the whole world knows you got turned down for a speaking gig. It's the people on that conference panel that know. You just need to send it out there, and if they say no, fuck it. They said no. Try again with a different one. There's no shortage of conferences out there now.
Or even try again.
Just because they're saying no right now doesn't mean that they won't in the future. No, because I got my hopes up for GDC 2019. That this one group I had proposed, which actually I think Toiya was actually there when we ran it at ECGC instead. When I ran this thing about alternative games careers, about hey, sometimes most of the time I actually would say things are not always as clear cut as graduate from school, go get a job at a studio, or go indie. A lot of us took a lot of detours. We've taken stuff not related to our specific niche or stuff that's not even in the industry sometimes. But you just got to be open-minded about it. And so we, I had a panel with a few other people, and we talked about our experiences, with that. And I was actually really looking forward to it being a GDC talk. It actually looked like we were going to get accepted because we made the first round, but then we didn't make the second one. So we took it to ECGC, and, it got pretty positive response. Just because one conference says no doesn't mean that they're going to say no if you try again the next year. It also doesn't mean they're going to say no at a different event. So you got to roll with the punches.
The same conference may reject it and then accept it. I've had that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the reason they accept or reject can be extremely variable. I know several people that there are certain conferences that, they tend to accept and reject basically based on, how much of a resume you have. So if you apply when you only, let's say, have 2 games to your name, they might be like, no, we passed. But then if you apply a year or 2 later when you've got a lot more credits under your thing, now you're fine. So don't assume that just because they've said no that it's a no forever.
Yeah, definitely factor speaking into like the long game. I think it's part of the long-term investment for your career. You know, it's building your network. Like you're saying, like just because one year Tom Abernathy, like the first year that I got a GDC talk accepted narrative track, he was like, "Oh, your talk from last year I wanted, but XYZ wasn't ready." Whatever. Like they're paying attention even if your work doesn't get accepted the first time. And then also for your long-term well-being, I think Rachel mentioned imposter syndrome early on. That is something that even
I'll go find the essay.
Feel. Yeah, exactly. It's a thing that pops up no matter how much experience or how many accolades you have. It doesn't matter. It can creep up. Speaking is just a great way to reinforce that you do know what you're talking about and you do have experience and your voices should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will add, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there was a Prime Material Cast from Twitch says, great talk. Is anybody speaking at Neriscope?
No, but I will say
no, I
was
wasn't.
at Neriscope last year. It is a fantastic conference that is now going to be streaming online, so everybody can attend it. It feels very much like a community. Everyone is welcome. So I highly recommend checking that one out.
Yeah, and now it's online, so we can all go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving a talk at Neriscope, and I was actually going to break in and say something slightly off topic, but still I think worth considering, and that is that like as useful and fantastic as speaking is, also don't forget self-care. Like there have definitely been years or times where I've just looked at it and been like, I put a lot of myself into my talk. As I said, I immolate myself every weekend, and sometimes I've just been like, you know what, I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to give myself a break. I'm going to be there as an attendee, or maybe like as like part of a panel or a roundtable, so it's a bit less like prep work. So and that has its downsides because it's good to always keep yourself in the vision of people as it is, but you also have to take care of yourself. So if you are just absolutely stressed out of your gird about giving speeches or doing like every single like conference or whatever, it's okay to take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to talk at that conference this year, maybe next year, or I will do I'll only do this conference, like 2 conferences this year, and the other conferences I'll do next year. Sorry, that was a downer.
So no, it's all good. All good info. All good info. Anything else you would like to add there, Mr. J?
No, I mean, thank y'all. This is, you mentioned going off topic. This is probably the most stayed on topic episode
ever
done. Ever. Usually we last about 8 minutes and then we go off on something.
Right.
But thank you all so much for this, because this is fantastic. This is why we do these shows, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time to call in and hang out with us for an hour or so.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
was great. Yeah, thank you.
And also make sure, like you said, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. And you can listen to the podcast, which this one will be up soon, anchor.fm/indiegamebusiness. We've got, how many do we have there? 100 and something now, Jay?
I don't even know.
There's a lot of podcasts, man. A lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
All right, well, everybody enjoy your hump day. That was not a joke about anything, but right. And thank you all so much for coming on.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
safe. We'll
Take
see everybody
care.
Friday.
Stay safe
Bye.
and hydrated.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, bye.